and Lang Peter Williamson of Shetland saw it. As also did Mr. Milne on the bridge, so having 3 witnesses, they can make a better case of it than the second mate did. I spoke to Milne after breakfast and told him that he should be above such nonsense, and that as an officer he ought to set the men a better example. He shook his weather-beaten head ominously, but answered with a characteristic caution. "Maybe aye, maybe na, Doctor," he said. "I didna care against it. I canna say I preen my faith in sea bogles, and I like. Though there's a mony as claims to hadna seen that and where. I'm nae easily feared. But maybe your ain blood would run a bit cold, man, if instead o' spearing about the daylight, you were with me at night, and seeing awful at shape, and gruesome, whiles here, whiles there, and a greeting and ken in the darkness, like a bee lumpy that hath lost its mither. You would nae be said to put down an old wives' clavers then, I'm thinking." I saw it as hopeless to reason with him, so contented myself with begging him as a personal favour to call me up on the next time Inspector appeared, a request to which he assented, with many ejaculations of expressive in his hopes that such an opportunity might never arise. As I had hoped, the white desert behind us has become broken by many thin streaks of water, which intersect in all directions. Our latitude today was 80 degrees 52 north, which shows that there was strong southerly drift upon the pack. Should the wind continue favourable, it will break up as rapidly as it was formed. At present, we can do nothing but smoke and wait, and hope for the best. I am rapidly becoming a fatalist. When dealing with such uncertain factors as the wind and ice, a man can be nothing else. Perhaps it was the wind and sand of the Arabian deserts which gave the minds of the original followers of Mahomet their tendency to bow to Kismet. These spectral alarms have a very bad effect upon the captain. I feared that it might excite his sensitive mind, and endeavoured to conceal the absurd story from him, but unfortunately he overheard one of the men making an allusion to it, and insisted upon being informed. As I had expected, he brought out all his latent lunacy in an exaggerated form. I can hardly believe that this is the same man who discouraged philosophy last night with the most critical acumen and the coolest judgment. He is pacing backwards and forwards upon the quarterdeck like a caged tiger, stopping now and again to throw out his hands with a yearning gesture and stare impatiently out over the ice. He keeps up a continual mutter to himself, and once he called out, "But little time, love, but little time!" Poor fellow. It is sad to see a gallant seaman and accomplished gentleman reduced to such pass, and to think that the imagination and delusion can cow a mind to which real danger is but the salt of life. Was ever a man in such a position as I, between the demented captain and a ghost-seeing mate? I sometimes think that I am the only really sane man aboard this vessel, even perhaps except perhaps the second engineer, who is a kind of ruminant, and would care nothing for all the fiends in the Red Sea, so long as they would leave him alone and not disarrange his tools. The ice is still opening rapidly, and there is every probability of our being able to maintain a start tomorrow morning. They will think I am inventing when I tell them at home all the strange things that have befallen me. "12 p.m. I have been a good deal startled. Though I feel steadier now, thanks to the stiff glass of brandy, I am hardly myself, however, and this handwriting will testify. The fact is that I have gone through a very strange experience, and I am beginning to doubt whether I am justified in branding everyone on board as madmen, because they profess to have seen the things which I did not seem reasonable to my understanding. I am a fool to let such trifle unnerve me, and yet, coming as it does after all these alarms, it has an additional significance, for I cannot doubt that either Mr. Manson's story or that of the mate, now that I have experienced that which I used to formerly scoff at. After all, it was nothing very alarming, a mere sound, and that was all. I cannot expect anyone reading this, if one should ever read it, will sympathize with my feelings or realize the effect which it produced upon me at the time. Supper was over, and I had gone on deck to have a quiet pipe before turning in. The night was very dark, so dark that standing under the quarter-boat, I was unable to see the officer upon the bridge. I think I have already mentioned the extraordinary silence which prevails in these frozen seas. In other parts of the world, they be ever so barren, there is some slight vibration of the air, something faint, a hum, be it from the distant haunts of men, or from the leaves of the trees, or the wings of the birds, or even the faint rustle of grass that covers the ground. One may not actively perceive the sound, and yet if it were withdrawn, it would be missed. It is only here in these Arctic seas that stark, unfathomable stillness obtrudes itself upon you in all its gruesome reality. You find your tympanum straining to catch some little murmur, and dwelling eagerly upon every accidental sound within the vessel. In this state I was leaning against the bulwarks, when there arose from the ice and almost directly underneath me, a cry, sharp and shrill upon the silent air of the night. Beginning, as it seemed to me, at a note such as a prima donna has never reached, and mounting from that ever higher and higher until it culminated in a long wail of agony, which might have been the last cry of a lost soul. The ghastly screams is still ringing in my ears. Grief, unutterable grief, seemed to be expressed in it, and a great longing, and yet through all there was an occasional wild note of exultation. It seems to have come from very close behind me, and yet as I glared into the darkness, I could make out nothing. I waited some little time, but without hearing any repetition of the sound, so it came below, more shaken than I ever have in my life before. As I came down, the companion I met, Mr. Milne, coming up to relieve the watch. "Well, doctor," he said, "maybe that's old wives' clevers, eh? Do you no hear it skirling? Maybe it's a superstition. What do you think of it now?" I was obliged to apologize to the honest fellow, and acknowledge that I was as puzzled as he was. Perhaps tomorrow morning things may look different. At present, I dare hardly to write all that I think. Reading it again in the days to come, when I have shaken off all these associations, I should despise myself for having been so weak. September 18th. Passed a restless and uneasy night, still haunted by that strange sound. The captain does not look as if he had much of a repose either, for his face is haggard and his eyes bloodshot. I have not told him of my adventure last night, nor shall I. He is already restless and excited, standing up, sitting down, and apparently utterly unable to keep still. A fine lead appeared in the pack this morning, as I had expected, and we were able to cast off our ice anchor and steam about 12 miles in west-southwest direction. We were then brought to a halt by a great floe of massive, as which any of us have left behind. It bars our progress completely, so we can do nothing but anchor again and wait until it breaks up, which we'll probably do within the next 24 hours, if the wind holds. Several bladder-nosed seals were seen swimming in the water, and one was shot, an immense creature, more than 11 feet long. They are fierce, pugnacious animals, and are said to be more than a match for a bear. Fortunately, they are slow and clumsy in their movements, so that there is little danger in attacking them upon the ice. The captain evidently does not think that we have seen the last of our troubles, though. As to why he should take such a gloomy view of the situation is more than I can fathom, since everyone else on board considers that we have had a miraculous escape and are sure now to reach the open sea. "I suppose you think it's all right now, doctor," he said as we sat together after dinner. "I hope so," I answered. "We mustn't be too sure, and yet no doubt you are right. We'll all be in the arms of our own true loves before long, lad, won't we? But we mustn't be too sure. We mustn't be too sure." He sat silent a little, swinging his legs thoughtfully backwards and forwards. "Look here," he continued. "It's a dangerous place, this. Even at its best, a treacherous, dangerous place. I have known men to cut off very suddenly in a land like this. A slip would do it sometimes, a single slip, and down you go through a crack, and only a bubble onto the green water to show where in was that you sank. It's a queer thing." He continued with a nervous laugh. "But in all the years I have been in this country, I never once thought of making a will. Not that I have anything to leave in particular, but still, when a man is exposed to danger, he should have everything arranged and ready. Don't you think so?" "Certainly," I answered, wondering what on earth he was driving at. "He feels better. For knowing it's all settled," he went on. "Now, if anything should ever befall me, I hope that you will look after things for me. There is very little in the cabin, but such as it is, I should like it to be sold, and the money divided in the same proportion as the oil money goes among the crew. The chronometer I wish you to keep yourself as some slight remembrance of our voyage. Of course, all this is a mere precaution, but I thought I would make the opportunity of speaking to you about it. I suppose I might rely upon you if there were any necessity." "Most assuredly," I answered. "And since you are taking the step, I may as well—" You, he interrupted. "You're all right. What the devil is the matter with you? There, I didn't mean to be peppery, but I don't like to hear a young fellow that has hardly begun life speculating about death. Go on up on deck and get some fresh air into your lungs instead of talking nonsense in the cabin, and encouraging me to do the same." The more I think of this conversation of ours, the less I do like it. Why should the man be settling his affairs at the very time when we seem to be emerging from all danger? There must be some method to his madness. Can it be he contemplates suicide? I remember that upon the one occasion he spoke in a deeply reverent manner of the heinousness of the crime of self-destruction. I shall keep my eye upon him, however, and though I cannot obtrude upon the privacy of his cabin, I shall at least make a point of remaining on deck as long as he stays up. Mr. Milne pooh-poohs my fears, and says it is only the skipper's little way, as he makes himself a very rosy view of the situation. According to him, we shall be out of the ice by the